Hi folks, in this text set you are reading essays about the idea of Black art and the Black artist, which is a sort of foundational concept within the Harlem Renaissance. Similarly to how modernists outside of Harlem used manifestos to define craft and style and form in various ways, artists within the Harlem Renaissance were doing that as well. However, their essays on style and approach heavily involved this self-assertion of identity that was at the heart of the Harlem Renaissance movement. So before I go any further, I do just want to address the language that's used in these essays so that you can be rhetorically responsible about it, as well as to avoid confusion. All of these essays, and many essays at the time, use this word. Now, this word at the time was used ubiquitously in both white and Black communities, and that's absolutely fine. However, today we would consider this word to be outdated or offensive, particularly in academic writing. So the general guideline is that when you are quoting one of these texts, the title or a piece of the text that uses that word, it is fine to use it because you're quoting somebody else. However, you as the writer would not want to use that to refer to one of these authors or something like that in academic writing. Many people follow that rule in videos or podcasts or in discourse, spoken discourse about these texts as well. That's generally the best approach for your own projects. However, just me personally, for me and myself, I don't feel comfortable repeating that word, so I will be substituting it throughout this video or referencing the author's essay rather than that word. So just to avoid confusion, that's why I do that. In your perusal comments and your writing, you want to practice responsible use as well. So the first essay that you are reading is a seminal text from Alain Locke about the new Black artist in the Harlem Renaissance. And this is a piece of a longer work where he wrote at length, very intellectually and philosophically, about what that meant at the time. And this became sort of the hub around which all of these conversations about Black art in the Harlem Renaissance focus. Now, Alain Locke has been referred to as the dean of the Harlem Renaissance. He was the first Black American to become a Rhodes Scholar. He was a very, very smart and intellectual and philosophical man, and that is who is responsible for that first essay, which was published in 1925. Now, in response to that, many within the Harlem Renaissance wrote their own sort of manifestos on this idea from various perspectives. Many of them wrote multiple manifestos on it. It was very much on their consciousness at the time. Now, one of those and most of those essays were building on or sort of in agreement with Locke's premise. But the second essay that you're reading is from George Schuyler, who is not. He rejects this idea, and you'll read about why in his essay. You should know going into that this was not a popular opinion within the Harlem Renaissance at the time, but it was an opinion he had every right to express, and that is what he is dealing with in his. That was published in 1926, and then almost immediately after George Schuyler's essay, which caused a bit of a stir in the Harlem Renaissance community, then you have Langston Hughes, who responds with The Artist and the Racial Mountain. And this text is a foundational essay about the idea of Black art in the Harlem Renaissance. It's probably, next to Locke's essay, the most noted in that movement, and it's a direct response to Schuyler. As well, it talks about these ideas in a way that will be great context for you as you approach his poetry in the Harlem Renaissance poetry sect. So as you're reading these three essays, you want to think about how they're in conversation with each other, how they are expressing different views, building upon, challenging, or debating different perceptions of this expression in the Harlem Renaissance. You also want to pick up on the sort of philosophical or more intellectual underpinnings of the way that artists were approaching their work during the Harlem Renaissance as well.